Hello dear, I'm sorry I'm ever so late.
Oh, hello.
How are you? How's your day been?
Come and have a sit down. Yes,
Oh,
no,
no.
I'm fine. I've had a good day, thank you. It's been just an ordinary day. I've fed the goat, I've milked the goat. I've been to the well a few times. Oh, I found a lovely new bread recipe I'm going to try out tomorrow. How's your day been though? You look a bit upset.
It's been hard and tiring, to be honest. I used to think that fishing was the hardest job in the world, but it's certainly not as hard as following Jesus sometimes.
And quite hard getting food on the table now you're not as well. But it must be wonderful spending all that time with Jesus, mustn't it? I still haven't got over how he healed my mum in that amazing way. Do you remember when she had that fever? It was extraordinary. And all those things he says and the way he speaks and what he does. It must be brilliant being with him. I won't have a word said against him. So what's been happening today then?
Well, he is fantastic, but in a way he's been the problem today.
He has been, why?
Well, everything was fine. The crowds weren't there. He was praying and we were learning from him about prayer. And that was great. But then he asked us something unusual. He said, "Who do the crowds say I am?" It was relatively easy. I told you after we were doing the mass feeding that people had been saying, some of them, he was John the Baptist. Some of them had been saying he was one of the old prophets come back to life, or Elijah. And so we told him this.
And what was the problem then? What happened?
Well, there's no problem with that. But then he looked at us and he said, "But what about you? Who do you say I am?" Well, I told him the truth. I said, "You're God's Christ." And I knew that was the case because of everything we'd seen. That we'd seen with the feeding of the 5,000, making stuff that hadn't been there. We'd seen him take control of all manner of creation. And you remember what I said about what John the Baptist had said about him? Where he'd made people who were blind see, people who were deaf hear, he'd made people who'd never walked walk, and he'd brought great good news which he'd sent us out already to take to everyone. So I was absolutely sure he was God's Christ.
So did Jesus say you were wrong somehow then?
Well, no, but then he told us not to tell anyone. And he also said something that really shocked us, and I don't really know what to make of it.
Go on, what did he say?
Well, Jesus said that the Son of Man must suffer and will be rejected by everyone, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders.
Hang on a minute, who is the Son of Man?
It's God's King, the one sent to rescue God's people that Daniel spoke about. And I'm sure that's Jesus. But how can he be God's King if God's people, God's leaders of God's people, reject him? It just doesn't make sense.
Well, don't ask me about it, I don't understand. Perhaps Jesus will be able to explain it to you.
Well, he did, and it got more difficult, to be honest, because Jesus said that the Son of Man must be killed. Yeah, and then raised on the third day or something. Now, how can God's King lead his people if he's been hated and if he's been killed? And what's going to happen to us, to be honest? You know, you've been very good, you've put up with this, but we've given up so much to follow him, and now he says it's just going to end in disaster. And it doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't seem to fit with everything we've seen. You know, that feeding of 5,000 people, just being completely in charge and in control. Having more left over at the end than at the beginning. It's what God can do. It's only God can do that. And I know that Jesus must know, but I wish it made sense to me. And sometimes it makes it so hard to trust him, but I know he's the one.